Mrs. G's History Scene. The top 5 things you need to know about the age of exploration. Number 1, European technology made the difference. So the Europeans had explored Asia to an extent before the 1400s, but it wasn't until they had gone to Asia and came back with gunpowder and the compass that they were really able to look to going further. And once they had this technology, they also developed the astrolabe, which allowed them to find their latitude, which gave them their position at sea. They developed better ships called caravels with the lateen sails, which are the triangular sails, and they had better maps. All of these things made it so that the Europeans could sail beyond land and they could try and find different ways to go to new areas. The technology also allowed them to conquer native peoples once they went to new areas. Number 2, you need to know the areas that were explored. In Asia, the Europeans explored the coasts of India and set up trading posts. They also went to what are known as the Spice Islands and China and Japan. In Africa, the Europeans mainly stayed along the coast. They didn't have the technology at the time nor the desire to go to the interior of Africa. And then the Americas, the New World. The Europeans explored North and South America. South America was mainly colonized by the Portuguese in the area of Brazil, and then Spain pretty much took over the rest of the area. In North America, we see the French in Canada and a bit in the interior of the United States. We see the English along the east coast of what is today the United States, and the Spanish were in the southwest of modern-day United States. Now, in these areas, they set up different colonies, but typically the French set up trading post colonies, the Spanish and Portuguese set up plantation colonies, and then the English set up settlement colonies. Now, the triangular trade and Middle Passage. The triangular trade refers to the trade routes that developed between Europe, Africa, and the Americas starting in the 1500s. And you can see from this picture that the raw goods go from the New World, the Americas, over to Europe, which is cut off the map. And then the Europeans sent manufactured goods to Africa, and then from Africa you had slaves going to the New World. Now, the Middle Passage was the journey of the enslaved Africans from Africa to the Americas. It was the middle leg of the triangular trade. So most of the time we teach the trade begins in Europe. So Europe, Africa, Americas. And the Middle Passage, middle part, and it is that horrendous journey where the Africans traveled in cramped, horrible conditions. Many did not survive the journey. Impact of Europeans on native groups. For the most part, the Europeans destroyed native cultures. And there were a few places where the natives still worked with the Europeans and the Europeans treated them with respect. We mainly see that in the French colonies. But for the most part, natives were enslaved, they were killed off by diseases to which they had no immunity, or they were forced to adopt European customs. We see this in most areas where the Europeans explored. In Asia, China and Japan saw the Europeans as a threat to their way of life, so they practiced a policy called isolationism, where they cut themselves off from the rest of the world. And then the fifth thing you need to know is the difference between mercantilism and capitalism. Mercantilism is an economic system where nations build power by accumulating wealth. The government is in charge of the economy. Remember, money equals power. That's the simplest way to remember mercantilism. Capitalism is an economic system based on private ownership of businesses to make a profit. So the key difference between mercantilism and capitalism. In mercantilism, the government controls the economy. In capitalism, private ownership and private business owners control the economy. And then this image summarizes mercantilism. You're building up the mother country's treasury with gold and silver. You have a favorable balance of trade, meaning you have more exports than imports, and you have that cycle of trade from the colonies providing the raw materials and then being the market for your manufactured goods. And there you have it, the top 5 things you need to know about the age of exploration.